Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Rift, Issue 1. It starts at Udao, where it's explained that Zuko is not here because he's with Ursa on her visit to the capital city. Iroh says he misses his tea shop, and the people of the city are told that the new government they elected is here to see them. I guess they so instantly came to the idea of democracy with no fanfare because of the guy that was lecturing about ancient governments. Aang says the remaining colonies are all trying to set up the same system of being both kingdoms. Aang thinks he sees someone at the banquet and eventually flies over everyone and goes to catch up with someone in a cloak, only to see an astral projected version of a past avatar who confusingly doesn't look like a ghost, and he can't hear what she's saying for some reason. Eventually, Toph explains she has so many new students she had to make earth tents outside the school to house them, and she doesn't have money to expand the building. She should say the territory surrounding them is owned by other people, so she'd have to buy it up to be allowed to expand it with earthbending. Sokka says she could get the money by charging tuition, and she says she doesn't want it to be a business because she's a good person at heart. Katara finds Aang outside trying to contact an avatar, but it can't get through to her for no apparent reason, because it's not that part of the story yet. I'd take it seriously if I could remember this happening in the show. I don't understand why Katara and Aang aren't giving me the same sweet feeling as Bunny and Antoine. Just like them, they're always calling each other by terms of endearment, and they're affectionate in the same way as Sokka and Suki, who I prefer as a couple. And I'm hoping it's not just because of the fact that Aang still looks like he's 12. He tells the acolytes they're going on a field trip to celebrate an Avatar's festival. Aang assumed that the Avatar Yang Chen was reminding him of that festival so it wouldn't be lost to history, when I doubt he'd have forgotten it, because he decided to train these people, so he would have gotten to it eventually. He says they're gonna bow to the statue 4 times. That sounds boring and needlessly repetitive, and it's not exactly humble of the person it's a statue of to want that even once. The fun part would be playing music and eating boring food. You know, it doesn't have to be boring food just because they're vegetarians. He also plans to fly kites, and doesn't have string for the others to fly them. Realistically, there's also an annoying bird on the island, and this statue isn't of Yang Chen or anyone Aang knows, because he didn't get a chance to find that out because he was flying kites with the kids. Sokka lampshades bowing to someone if you don't know who she is. And Aang saying that you should follow tradition reminds Toph of why she hated her childhood and her awful excuses for parents who never gave her any different reason than that for giving her orders and suppressing who she was. She wasn't even allowed to play with the other kids even though she was lonely, and somehow she was given the same excuse when this couldn't be a tradition. This is just something exclusive to her for being blind. Somehow Toph doesn't simply explain how she's feeling to her friends, and instead refuses to participate in the festival because it's not like her to bow to anyone. And she calls the festival unimportant because it being ignored wasn't the end of the world. Aang gets annoyed but knows his impressionable fans are watching, so he forces himself to stay cheerful instead of being a bad influence. It's too bad the story had Aang tell us what celebrating the festival would be like, because it was all a waste of space considering that we do get to see them all do that. The symbols annoyed Toph until she destroyed him, and she doesn't see the point of the celebration, and finally says that she wanted to be done with these kinds of old rituals when she left her town. Nobody forced her to come along though, so she should have known better than to come here. They see a town where the meadow used to be. Sokka likes the smell of food and wants to leave. Katara recognizes someone and hugs her. Aang hallucinates Yang Chen again, and earthbending gets used to fling them over a fence where they find out the sacred grounds were polluted. One of the guards doesn't care that he's the Avatar, and they try to attack the heroes. And the guards end up kept from causing trouble by earthbending their hands. Aang flies to have the guards run into each other. Someone's impressed by what he saw happen to his guards, and his name's Satoru. And he's honored to meet Aang. He eventually says he's a refinery engineer who's a temporary boss until his uncle comes back, and says the guards should have checked with him before attacking them, even though dealing with trespassers is their jobs. And for all they knew, Aang was just another one of the acolytes, so the arrow didn't give it away. He says this is the best day of his life, as Aang points out that saving the world was a team effort, and he's honored to meet Toph because she's a metal bender. So he wants to give her a tour of the refinery. News travel is far and fast for some people and not others. I like that Toph insists on him having to say her first name instead. Aang tries to tell Satoru something, and it's obvious what he was going to say based on the last few words. But somehow he keeps talking about stuff that's obvious and pointless. He must not actually care about the past of this place. And that makes sense because air nomads have been everywhere. I mean, why wouldn't they be if they're nomads? Katara uses water to steal Sokka's meat. Satoru says that here it doesn't matter where you're from, and shows all types of benders working in the factory. Then he reveals that in a different room he's replaced all the bending with machines. Somehow Aang asks why he'd go through all that trouble, and has to get told that with machines even non-benders can do some things in just days of training. Well, it somehow takes years for people to get good at bending. I like seeing Sokka get excited over machines. The forklift breaks. Satoru doesn't blame Sokka because he built it, and Toph examines it with her seismic sense and says even her students can, causing Satoru to want to pay her students to visit and help out with the machines every now and then. She just wants him to sponsor a new school building for her. Toph says she'd love to be in a partnership with him, and they'd hear her friends' comments about it. I have to wonder if this was written to establish that Satoru is the father of her kids later on, or if this was just meaningless, because this is the only guy I remember showing interest in. Aang gets given a vision of a monster destroying the factory. If it's because of the pollution, why would it have taken longer than the first time the grounds were polluted? And it's so arbitrary what places are considered to be sacred grounds by the spirits, because if they mean any place where the spirits used to be at in huge groups, then that would apply to everywhere. Why are some places more populated by them? Why aren't spirits rampaging literally every time there's pollution anywhere? So some of them aren't so bad about pollution. Aang finally tells Satoru what he wants, and Toph would normally be the only smart one here with her pragmatic answer. Frustratingly, the writer forces him to not explain what he saw in his vision, when saying that might have gotten Toph and Satoru to take him seriously. Not shut down a factory that employs people, of course, but at least not make fun of him, and get him to do research on how to get rid of the evil spirit preemptively. In response to the pollution, Satoru insists that it's not the refinery's fault because somehow he believes his uncle that it's a natural thing. Toph somehow thinks she needs to be in physical contact with Satoru to know for a fact that he doesn't think he's lying. Otherwise, she's not sure, even though she's a master at her seismic sense. I guess she's just jumping at an excuse to make physical contact with him, because in the show, she put her hand on a wall, and that was good enough for detecting if Jet was lying. Sokka instantly sides with Toph, even though, like with Jet, he could just be mistaken. After predictable bickering, there's an earthquake that they get blamed for. Aang wants to help clean up, and they find out one of the machines is freaking out. So the heroes fight back the boulder is spewing out to help people escape, and someone's trapped. Eventually, Toph protects Aang, and he helps someone escape. He thanks them and they escape. I assume we're gonna find out why the machines are freaking out when Satoru is supposed to be a genius. It can easily be assumed that one of the benders sabotaged it because it's a job-stealing machine. Eventually the story gets annoying because the security group from the factory's old boss is antagonistic to the heroes. Someone complains about the destruction of a machine when Satoru told them earlier that it could have just been unplugged. Sadly, the story ends with Toph reuniting with her father, even though he's going to be unlikable with her. And that's all I remember about this arc in retrospect. And there's no reason he couldn't have only shown up in the 3rd issue. He doesn't do anything and wasn't in the first one for the most part. Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Rift, Issue 2. Toph's father says he doesn't have a daughter and gets called out on it. That's the kind of reason I dreaded going back to this arc. Satoru's uncle says that if the scared employees want to keep their jobs, they'll go back to work before they get fired, because he can replace them all in an hour. It's smart of him, but I'm just wishing he had a lot less screen time. His only character is being unlikable, so there's no entertainment there. I get it in one panel. Somehow Toph still wants to talk to her horrible dad, and Aang wants to start a fight with these thugs, and I like that his fans find it exciting that they have to break so many rules. Eventually Aang warns his fans to take off to protect themselves, and a new member of the Rough Rhinos is especially mad at Aang because he had to join them because Ozai was overthrown and he used to be a soldier. Aang earthbands his fist and tells him he should find another group to join, without explaining how or why the group is bad news. There's another cartoonishly evil bodyguard who's happy with threatening a little girl with a weapon, who gets caught by Aang and somehow says he'll feel guilty when he clearly isn't capable of that. And it's not framed like he's joking. Toph tells Aang to stop trying to teach her to be like one of his fans, and I have to assume Sokka accidentally missed this thug's head because he should have known better than to hit his armor. Eventually Sokka takes Katara away from these snobs, and Sokka gets the idea to trick them into riding the rhinos into the bend, which gives Katara access to the river. I know these guys are doing their jobs, but it's so confusing that there's such gleeful cartoon villains about it against minors. I doubt these guards would have a license to kill, and that's pretty messed up for the world if they do. Some people get threatened and saved by the forklift operated by one of their friends, who somehow thought he was allowed to try to kill someone. They get chained up, and one of their enemies says, "Never have a conversation when you're in the middle of a fight," because this is a better written comic than the crappy ones from now. Then he gets stopped by a chain Toph metal bent. She complains that they should have let Jingbo use the forklift on him to chase him to the ocean. Eventually Aang's told they want to finish the celebration, and Aang agrees that he should do that for them first before talking. Eventually the factory gets damaged by Toph, and I have to hope she'll fix that damage. She's told where to go to talk to her dad, and I'm just wondering why the hell she wants to talk to him again, especially since in the last issue she said that she had to run away from her past just to live, and here she is running towards it. I hate idiot plots. Why would she want to reconnect with a father like that? Aang and his fans plan on celebrating in a restaurant because it's the spot they're supposed to celebrate at. But the cabbage salesman from the show is running the place and is scared of bad things happening to his cabbages again since he's a jinx. He gets asked if he'd mind if they ate outside food here. He could have explained why they want to do that. Since he's a restaurant owner, he refuses, but at least he's reasonable enough to say that they can still eat the outside food as long as they order at least one dish. I think if it was being realistic, he would have kicked them out, so I'm glad it wasn't. I have to assume the reason Aang ordered the house special instead of the cheapest dish is that he was too scared of annoying him. And I'm glad Toph called Satoru out on acting like a coward in front of his uncle. So Toph stupidly goes to visit someone who disowned her, when I can understand why he'd write Toph reconnecting with her parents, but not why he would drag it out to an agonizing degree. And if she doesn't get to see her mother either, it's not doing its full job. Her mom might have been the same way anyways, so this just saves us dialogue. There's a whole page where Sokka subtly gloats about the fact that his trapped enemies are at his mercy near a bum of theirs. Sokka tries to put out the match with his finger and realistically can't do it or even blow it out. So he throws it, and the explosion reveals the secret passageway for the heroes to check out. Eventually Aang starts saying a blessing before his meal with them, and that conveniently gets him to have a conversation with Yang Chen in the spirit world. That's because he was doing an air nomad tradition thing. But he was already doing that the whole arc. Why did he have to be in this particular little spot? Why would it be better than the rest? Yang Chen says that she couldn't be heard because Aang broke off his contact with Roku, and she's before him. I never anticipated that Aang would be unable to contact her because he broke off his relationship with Roku because she's not him. He didn't destroy all of the other Avatar artifacts. So it's just convoluted. And the fact that he can contact her at all is even more convoluted. The writer writing himself into a corner because he can't just, God forbid, have Aang figure out on his own this and solve the problem himself. The fact that he kept seeing Yang Chen before this didn't add anything to the story of substance, it just lengthened it. When he could have remembered to celebrate the festival on his own, it'd make just as much sense. Toph had this predictable, unlikable scene with her father. She says he's got no right to talk to her like that. You'd think he'd know all of the cool stuff she's done since then and respect it because it was mandatory for Ozai being taken down. But he doesn't even mention that because she's not who he wanted her to be. And apparently, Ozai destroying the world is worth that. It turns out Sokka is wearing his belt on his head to keep both hands free, even though it means he has nothing to hold his pants up, which means he won't be able to run without losing them. Go figure they see an underground mine. What's with the surprise? They say the pollution's source. I hate not getting to see the impact when Sokka hits one of the guards, who as usual goes on to attack first and ask questions later policy. Katara warns Sokka that the fragile supports could get destroyed by the collateral damage and they're right under the town. And I understand why I didn't remember this from the last time I read this either. It's just not intuitive that the supports would be fragile. That they wouldn't reinforce them. Sokka tells the employees they should leave for their own good and that the thugs are frozen in place anyways. He's told that they're here for a job out of desperation because Sokka's tribe is poorer than ever. They plan to stay until their boss tells them to leave. So Sokka plans on talking to their boss. Aang explains again why he severed his connection with Roku and admits that Toph had a point because him agreeing with her is why he did that. Yang Chen says that if he separates himself from his past lives, he'll repeat their mistakes. She explains that she made a mistake in the past in the same city. The king invited her there, and she wasn't grateful to her protective father figure for tagging along unnecessarily. So I guess she hates his personality. She mastered every element last week, and this is still only her first mission. So the world was peaceful back then, in the sense that it didn't need the Avatar. She heard some fortune tellers worry that someone interested in the new things tried to reason with the spirits. That usually doesn't go well in the show, so I tend to hate them. It thinks it's being deep having the spirits be mad about environmental destruction primarily, but if they still act like monsters, they might as well be, and I'll think of them the same way. Toph's father doesn't have anything to say about the obviously great things she did, and the scene is pointless, needlessly depressing padding. I really don't see why the writer thought he had to not have Toph's father acknowledge that she was necessary. Sokka eventually tells her father the iron mine under the town might collapse, and he wasn't even aware of this and gets told to follow him. Meanwhile, the flashback shows that the city was ruined, and the Avatar tells the spirit to tell him why he's upset, which he could have done right away. He says he had a girlfriend and some humans moved to this place, and his girlfriend entertained their requests and watched over them. But this guy hated them because he heard that the humans were fighting with the spirits. But as I know from the Legend of Korra, the spirits were the majority in the past and did nothing but bully the humans just for being humans every time they saw them. So who cares? He should know the spirits started it. So because he acted like a jerk, she told him to leave. He was rampaging because he felt her last breath, so this could have easily not happened. I haven't been mentioning the names of these spirits because they don't have personalities, really. One's the nice one and one's the jerk. That's all they deserve to be called. In the present, Toph's father is opposed to this mining operation because he knew it was too dangerous to get rid of the iron ore here. The bad guy wanted to do it anyways because he doesn't care if people get hurt because he's greedy. Toph feels the earth shifting all around them, and her father is smart enough to tell his employees to leave because he believes her. One of the thugs catches up with Sokka saying he isn't going anywhere and throws a weapon at one of the support beams by accident. Which isn't exactly a memorable way of having this conflict happen. Yang Chen says that when she saw the evil spirit attacking a human settlement, she went into the Avatar state and told him to lay down his armor and listen to her. And he did, which he could have done earlier. They came to an agreement, so why in the world did he listen to her if he was the type to rampage at all? He would have hid her away. So the establishing of the Yang Chen festival is her agreement with him. He asks her what the terms of their agreement are, even though I thought it was obvious the terms were to celebrate the festival in the manner he already did, and to not pollute the sacred grounds. He must have been able to see the future, because otherwise, how would he even know that pollution was a thing that could exist, so that he could make it so that no pollution ever is a part of his agreement? Aang's woken up by an earthquake causing him to run out with them and see Sokka with the injured employees. Thankfully, Jingbo has bandages and a splint in his backpack because apparently this is standard Iraq-like procedure. Or not, because he's the only one with a backpack. Aang earthbends and hears Katara, who says if he earthbends, the mine would collapse. And this place is full of iron ore, so Toph's metal bending is all that's protecting everyone here. It's too bad Toph talked to her father in this issue, because this is the kind of thing that made me look down on the arc in retrospect, even though the majority of it is great, but in a way where I take it for granted. This issue is by Jean Yang, and the first issue of this arc is good, even if it feels like a waste of time for the most part until Aang and his friends discover the factory polluting sacred grounds. Aang should have explained in his thoughts that he didn't simply warn people that he saw a spirit destroy the factory because he knows they're just gonna send him to try to kill the spirit when that's beyond even the Avatar's abilities. Spirits are invincible just being convenient to the plot. And I don't think the Avatar has very good luck with reasoning with spirits. Practically all that happened was dialogue. And Aang and his friends aren't exactly reasonable here, because in this period of history, they can't have factories that don't pollute. And they have to invent those factories so that they can eventually invent factories that don't pollute. So they shouldn't be standing in the way of progress. And they didn't know that it was sacred grounds, and it's completely arbitrary what even qualifies as sacred grounds in the first place. Everywhere should be sacred grounds by the same logic. Everywhere has had spirits in it before. In this story by Jean Yang, there's miners in a place that's too dangerous to mine at this point, and eventually a thrown weapon accidentally causes the mine to start collapsing, and only Toph is holding it up. Which is a creative excuse for the mine collapse, but it's completely forgettable. She didn't need to go to her father to end up here. Toph could have stayed with Sokka the whole time. It made the story better instead of defining the entire arc with this one miserable and predictable scene. The scene is so predictable with what's said, and completely irrelevant to the plot, that you're better off going with your common sense and skipping everything these two say to each other in this issue. It's not like someone who knows she hated her childhood and ran away from her past to run back towards it. The comic arcs keep having their major problem be padding. I don't know why Toph's father couldn't have been written to explain that he does know Toph was necessary, and it's just that doesn't keep him from being annoyed with her. He could still congratulate her on being necessary for the Avatar,